Hello, today we are reading about the animals of the temperate deciduous forest habitat. It's a long name, isn't it? Our learning targets are to explain what a forest is, identify characteristics of the temperate deciduous forest habitat, demonstrate an understanding of the words store and bark, and then write and draw about characteristics of the temperate deciduous forest habitat. Our key vocabulary are climate, species, store, temperate, and territory. Climate. Climate is a noun, and climate is the type of weather a place has over a long period of time. The climate of the desert is very dry and very different from the climate in the tropical rainforest. Species. Species is also a noun, and species is a group of living things that have similar characteristics. There are about 70 species of whales. Store is a verb, and it means to save for future use. To prepare for winter, some animals store food. You might store food in your pantry. Temperate is an adjective, and it means not extremely hot and not extremely cold. Many places in the United States have a temperate climate. Territory is a noun, and it's an area in which an animal or group of animals live. Many animals protect their territory. Okay, so what do we already know about forests? What is a forest? Have you ever been in a forest? What are some things that might be found in a forest? Are all forests the same? Not all forests are the same. Today, we will learn about the temperate deciduous forest, and these highlighted areas have temperate deciduous forests, and they exist all over the world. You can see that, right? So right here, we actually live in a temperate deciduous forest. There are temperate deciduous forests in Europe and in Asia and in Australia and even in South America. This forest is also a national park called the Great Smoky Mountains National Park and is one of the most visited national parks in the United States. The mountains are named for the blue-gray mist that surrounds the mountain peaks. Many of you have actually been to the Great Smoky Mountains. They're in Gatlinburg, Tennessee. All right, key vocabulary. We have climate, species, store, temperate, and territory. Listen carefully to learn about what a temperate deciduous forest is. Rattenborough here with the next thrilling chapter in our habitat read-alouds. After looking at some very exotic or strange and fascinating faraway places, I thought we could visit a habitat that is quite common in many parts of the United States. This is a forest habitat. You know you're in a forest habitat when everywhere you look, there are trees all around you. You may be wondering why I'm up in a tree. Well, I'm enjoying the wonderful view of a forest in North America. There are over 500,000 acres of forest in this national park. So 1 acre is about as big as a football field. Many of you have seen forests like this before, either in real life or in books. You may be familiar with some of the plants and animals that live here in the Smoky Mountains. A lot of them live in many other places all over the United States. There are many different kinds of forests in the world. The forests of the Smoky Mountains are called temperate forests. A temperate forest grows in an area that has 4 seasons, including a warm summer and a cold winter. And it receives steady rainfall throughout the year. Even though these forests have warm winter and cold winter, temperate means that they're not extremely hot or extremely cold, like the other areas we've learned about so far. This forest is also called a deciduous forest because it is full of deciduous plants, trees, bushes, and shrubs that lose their leaves every fall, then grow new leaves when the temperatures start to rise in the spring. The temperate deciduous forest has a much friendlier climate than other habitats we've learned about, and it can support many different kinds of plants and animals. The climate of the habitat is the type of the weather a place has over a long period of time. So, what does temperate mean? It means not extremely hot and not extremely cold. And what does deciduous mean? Deciduous means that it loses leaves every fall and then grows new leaves when the temperatures start to rise again in the spring. So, what is a temperate deciduous? A temperate deciduous forest is a forest in an area that experiences 4 seasons and has trees that lose their leaves in the fall and then grow them back in the spring. A temperate deciduous forest is made up of broadleaf trees like oak, maple, beech, and elm. Broadleaf trees have broad or wide leaves. These trees grow very tall and are thickly covered with wide leaves that are better at collecting sunlight than trees like pines trees that have needles instead of leaves. Under these taller trees, there are saplings, young trees, as well as shrubs and bushes and plants that bear or produce fruit. Closer to the ground grow shorter plants like grasses and wildflowers. I'm going to start at the top and work my way down so I can show you this wonderful habitat. The tree I'm standing in now is an oak tree. This oak tree is very tall and is covered with leaves and acorns. An acorn is a seed, and if it gets planted in the forest soil, it can grow roots and a shoot, and it will eventually turn into an oak sapling. Like the saguaro cactus in the desert and the acacia tree in the savanna, oak trees provide shelter and food for many animals. Owls, woodpeckers, mice, and foxes make their homes in the branches or around the roots of the oak tree, and acorns are food for squirrels, birds, deer, and other animals. Look at that tasty insect. Well, the oak tree is home for hundreds of different kinds of insects, like the stink bug and the weevil, which eat its leaves and acorns. Moths and butterflies lay their eggs in the tree. Other insects like ants and timber beetles live under the bark of the oak or in dead and fallen trees. Just as insects are drawn to the oak as a source of food, so are animals that feed on insects. Spiders and all kinds of birds hunt for tasty bugs among the branches of the oak tree. Bears and other animals find food here too. The oak tree is an amazing habitat. Down on the forest floor, there are all kinds of shrubs, the fruits of which are food to many different species of animals, including rabbits, chipmunks, deer, and omnivores like bears. Some of these blueberries are perfectly ripe and they taste delicious. What a tasty treat. Down here on the ground, I can see wildflowers, grasses, and clover. These plants, which cover the forest floor, are home to many types of insects and are food to grazing animals such as deer and mice. One interesting thing about the plants in the forest is that often they grow leaning in the same direction. Isn't that strange? Well, they do that because they are all looking for sunlight. The leaves of the big trees get all the sun. Only a small amount of sunlight gets through to the forest floor. That's why it's so shady in here. The plants down here have to grow toward the sun so they can get enough light to make food that they need to survive. You may have seen this fuzzy green stuff growing on rocks, trees, and the ground in the forest or countryside. Mosses are small green plants that grow in clumps in damp and shaded places. They cover parts of the forest floor like a carpet and are home to many small animals and insects. It feels really soft to walk on, thick and spongy, and it tickles a bit. Now we're going to take a look at some of the animals that live here. Great Smoky Mountains National Park is home to almost 400 different kinds of animals. Animals that live in the temperate deciduous forest are adapted to living in a habitat with 4 seasons. Who knows the 4 seasons and can tell me what they are? Fall, winter, spring, and summer. Let's start with the mighty oak tree again. This amazing tree is home to many animals, and I'm standing at the nest of one of them, the gray squirrel. This little animal is covered in warm gray-brown fur with a white chest and a long, bushy tail. Squirrels live in holes in the trunks of trees or in nests high up in trees like this one. Their nests are built from twigs, leaves, moss, and grass. Squirrels use their strong back legs and sharp claws to help them leap from tree to tree and to run up and down tree trunks, and they use their tails to help them balance. Squirrels are omnivores and spend most of their time looking for food. What's an omnivore? What kind of food do omnivores eat? Plants and animals, or insects. The squirrel eats mostly acorns from the oak tree, but it also eats nuts, mushrooms, berries, seeds, and even bird eggs and insects. The squirrel might nibble on an acorn or two now, but it'll also bury and store or save many acorns underground, so it'll have them during the winter when other food is hard to find. A barred owl lives in the hole of this oak tree. I have to be careful because owls are carnivores. What's a carnivore? An animal that eats meat. Unlike the elf owl in the desert, this owl happens to enjoy eating rats. This owl also eats other small animals like mice, insects, and even other birds. Owls have very good hearing and excellent eyesight, which allows them to find their prey easily in the thick forest. Owls are nocturnal, which means they only come out at night. So I have some time before this one is ready for a late night snack. Hold on, what's that scratching sound coming from below? It's a black bear! Black bears are common in North American temperate deciduous forests, and there are more than 1,000 in this national park. They are large animals. They weigh as much as 14 first graders would weigh all together. And when they stand on their hind legs, they can be taller than a person. Bears are omnivores and hibernate or sleep during the winter in hollowed out trees or caves. When they are hibernating, bears use less energy and do not need to eat any food for many, many days. This is a good thing because during the winter, the foods that the bears eat are scarce and hard to find. Bears are covered in thick black or brown fur, and they have sharp claws to strip the bark off trees to uncover insects that live there. The word bark in this sentence means the outer covering of a tree. This bear uses its long, sticky tongue to get into every crack to hunt out the insects, and they'll make a delicious meal for him, I'm sure. I just saw a deer through the trees. Deer often live in the temperate deciduous forest because it is such a good place to stay hidden, but they often hunt for food in neighboring meadows. This is a buck. A buck is a male deer, and we can tell because male deer have antlers. Did you know that a buck's antlers fall off every year and will grow back again? Bucks mark their territory by stripping the bark off trees with their antlers. A territory is an area in which an animal or group of animals live. Animals often protect their territory and try to keep other animals out. Bucks also use their antlers for fighting with other male deer. This deer is a white-tailed deer, and its coat is tan right now, but in the winter it'll change to a gray-brown, and it has patches of white on its underside. This helps the deer to be camouflaged or hidden in the environment. How do you think the change in color from tan or gray-brown with white patches patches of white in winter helps to camouflage the deer? Because there aren't really leaves or stuff in the winter, right? It's kind of gray out and there might be snow, right? It'll help it camouflage. Deer graze on grasses and eat tree leaves, berries, and acorns, among other things. They mostly come out to feed at night when the light is low and they rest during the day. This white-tailed deer has strong, long legs which are good for running and jumping and for escaping predators like wolves, coyotes, and people. The temperate deciduous forest climate can support many different plants and animals because it has 4 seasons. It's called temperate because it never gets too cold like the Arctic or too hot like the Sonoran Desert. There is a steady rate of rainfall throughout the year so plants can grow and animals can have food and water to keep them alive. This is just one of the many kinds of forests in the world. Next, we are going to take a look at another kind. It's going to be very different in lots of ways. I'll see you on our next adventure. All right, go ahead, hop up, take a wiggle break if you need one, and then come back for our comprehension questions and our word work. Are all forests the same, or are there different kinds? There are different kinds. I want you to describe the temperate deciduous forest habitat. Let's talk about its climate. Let's talk about its weather. What's its weather like? It's not too hot, it's not too cold, and it has how many seasons? 4. It's got fall, winter, spring, and summer. Are there a lot of plants? Yes, there are a lot of plants. Are there a lot of animals? Yeah. And what is, if I say that it's deciduous, what does that mean? It has to do with the leaves. It means that the leaves fall off in the fall and then they grow back in the spring. How is the temperate deciduous forest habitat different than other habitats you've learned about? This is the only one that has 4 seasons, the only one that isn't too hot or too cold, right? How is it the same? Animals have adapted to live there. Okay, I want you to look at this picture. What kind of animal is this? It's a gray squirrel. And where does the gray squirrel find shelter? Either in a hole or a nest in an oak tree. What are some of the foods that this gray squirrel eats? Acorns, other small plants, and insects. Is the gray squirrel a carnivore, an herbivore, or an omnivore? An omnivore because it eats acorns and plants, but it also eats bird eggs and insects. Okay, let's look at this picture. What kind of animal is that? It's a black bear. And where does the black bear find shelter in the temperate deciduous forest? In hollowed out trees or in caves. What kind of food does it eat? Plants and small animals. Is the black bear a carnivore, herbivore, or omnivore? An omnivore because it eats plants and animals. During the winter, the black bear hibernates. What does that mean? It means it sleeps during the winter. In the read aloud you heard, the squirrel might nibble on an acorn or two now, but it will also bury and store many acorns underground so it will have them in the winter when the food is hard to find. Say the word store with me. Store. Can you whisper it? Store. Can you robot voice it? Store. Store means to save for future use. When warm weather arrives, I store my winter hat and gloves in a box in the closet. Okay. So when we're talking about store in this story, we're talking about saving it for another time, right? But if I was talking about I went to the store, am I talking about I went to the save? No. What am I talking about? Like a grocery store, somewhere where I'd buy things, right? So there are a couple of different meanings for store. So there's store like when you go to and you buy things, and then there's store like when you have something and you're saving it for later. Okay. All right. Oh, okay. Also in our read aloud, we heard bears are covered in thick black or brown fur, and they have sharp claws to strip the bark off of trees to uncover the insects that live there. In that sentence that I just read, what do I mean by bark? The outer covering of a tree. What's another meaning for the word bark? Like a dog would bark, right? So, store and bark both have multiple meanings. Okay, and we have to make sure that when we're thinking about our story and it says that the bears have sharp claws to strip the bark off trees, that we're thinking about the right kind of bark. Because if we were sitting here and we were thinking about to strip the bark and we were thinking about woof woof, that would be confusing, right? So we have to make sure that we're careful with our multiple meaning words. Okay. All right, let's check our learning targets. Did we explain what a forest is? Did we identify characteristics of the temperate deciduous forest habitat? Yeah. Did we demonstrate an understanding of the words store and bark? Yep. And then here in just a moment, you're going to write and draw about characteristics of the temperate deciduous forest habitat. Have a wonderful, wonderful day. See you next time.